My name is Carol, I'm 68 years old. And at my grandson's 6th birthday party, my own daughter-in-law called the police to have me thrown out of her house. Before I tell you about how I ended up giving her a new job scrubbing toilets, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. It all came to a head in a room filled with crystal glasses and quiet, expensive chatter. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you have to whisper. My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, stood by the marble fireplace, her designer dress shimmering under the chandelier. Her voice, however, was anything but quiet. It was icy calm, sharp enough to cut through the polite murmurs as she spoke into her phone. "Yes, an intruder," she said, her eyes locked on me. "An elderly woman, she's causing a disturbance. Please, you need to come and remove her from my property." A fork clattered against a plate somewhere in the room. 20 pairs of eyes belonging to Tiffany's wealthy friends, all turned to me. I could feel their stares like physical things, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. My son David, her husband, was sitting at the dining table. His face was as white as the linen tablecloth. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared down at his plate like it held the secrets to the universe. An hour earlier, none of this had seemed possible. An hour earlier, I was just a grandmother, filled with excitement, standing on their doorstep. I was holding a gift I'd spent the last month pouring my love into. A soft, hand-knitted blanket for my grandson Leo, in his favorite shade of blue. My best dress, a simple but clean navy blue shift, felt perfectly fine when I left my small, quiet apartment. But the moment Tiffany opened the door, I knew it was wrong. Her smile was a perfect, bright white thing, but it never reached her eyes. Her gaze traveled down my simple dress and back up, and I saw a flicker of distaste she couldn't quite hide. "Carol," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt more like poison. "You made it." "Of course, sweetheart," I said, holding out the gift. "Happy birthday to my sweet Leo. I made him something." Tiffany took the box from me. "Oh, you shouldn't have," she said, and for a second I thought she meant it kindly. But then she glanced at the wrapping and said, "We'll open it later." She turned and walked into the living room, placing my carefully wrapped gift on a small table by the back door, next to a basket of things that looked like they were destined for goodwill. I felt a small sharp pang in my chest, but I pushed it down. For Leo, I told myself. When I finally saw my grandson, his face lit up like the 4th of July. "Grandma!" he shouted, running and wrapping his little arms around my legs. I knelt and hugged him tight, breathing in that wonderful little boy smell of grass stains and birthday cake. For that one moment, none of the coldness mattered. But the moment was fleeting. As I handed Leo a smaller, separate gift I had in my purse, a little wooden toy car I'd found at a craft fair, Tiffany swooped in. She gently took the car from Leo's hand. "Oh, another one," she said, forcing a laugh. "Let's put this with your other things so it doesn't get lost." She then glanced at my gift on the side table. "You know, Carol, we have to be so careful with old wool. It can carry moths." With a dismissive little wave of her hand, she picked up the box, walked over to a large wicker basket near the patio door. A basket I now saw was filled with old newspapers and trash, and dropped it inside. It felt like a punch to the gut. All those hours, all those stitches, all the love I'd woven into that blanket, now sitting on a pile of garbage. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words caught in my throat. David saw it happen. He saw it all. He just gave me a weak, apologetic shrug from across the room, trapped by his wife's silent reign of terror. Dinner was an exercise in humiliation. I was seated between Tiffany's mother, Barbara, a woman who looked at me as if I were a bug she was considering squashing, and a man who only talked about his stock portfolio. Barbara kept asking me patronizing questions. "So, Carol, how is your little business going? Still keeping you busy?" She said the word little as if it were something dirty. The final straw, the thing that led to the phone call, was so small, so innocent. During dessert, Leo, his face smeared with chocolate frosting, climbed down from his chair and ran to me, wanting to show me a drawing he'd made at school. In his excitement, he stumbled, and a little bit of his juice sloshed from his cup onto my dress. "Oh, sweetie, it's okay," I said, laughing and hugging him. But Tiffany saw it differently. She shot up from her chair, her face a mask of fury. "Leo, get away from her right now," she shrieked. The room fell silent. "Look what you've done. You'll get your clothes filthy." She grabbed Leo by the arm, pulling him away from me. He started to cry, confused and scared. "But Mommy, I just wanted to show Grandma." "Enough," she snapped. Then she turned her glare on me. It was pure venom. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is not the kind of environment I want for my son. You've done nothing but cause problems since you arrived." My voice was barely a whisper. "Tiffany, it was just an accident." "No," she said, her voice dangerously low. "The accident was letting you in my house." And that's when she pulled out her phone. My own son just sat there frozen. As Tiffany described me to the police dispatcher, a disturbance, an intruder. I stood up from the table. My legs felt shaky but my back was straight. I didn't say a word. I just walked toward the front door. The weight of 20 pairs of hostile eyes following my every step. As the lock clicked shut behind me, sealing me out of my son's life, a strange calm washed over the hurt. Tiffany had no idea what she had just done. She thought she was throwing out the trash. She had just declared war on the one person who could erase her entire world with a single phone call. I must have driven for an hour. The city streets a meaningless blur outside my car window. The pristine lawns and sprawling mini-mansions of Tiffany's neighborhood eventually gave way to the familiar, gritty comfort of downtown Denver. Each traffic light felt like a punch, a bright red reminder to stop, to breathe, to process the raw, searing humiliation. Tiffany's voice was a venomous echo in my head. An elderly woman causing a disturbance. My own son's face, pale and averted, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. It was a profound, soul-crushing kind of pain, the kind you feel when the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor turn out to be the storm. But as I navigated the familiar route towards my apartment, a different feeling began to bubble up from the depths of my sorrow. It started as a low simmer and grew into a rolling boil. It was the same fire that had fueled me 35 years ago. After my husband's sudden funeral left me a widow with a young son and a mountain of debt. It was the grit that had pushed me to turn our dusty two-car garage into the first makeshift office of what would one day become a titan of industry. It was pure, unadulterated resolve. I turned a corner, and there it was, standing against the bruised twilight sky like a monument of glass and steel. The Summit Innovations Tower. My building. My legacy. From the street it looked like a distant star, but I knew every inch of it. I knew the name of the security guard who worked the graveyard shift, the specific hum of the elevators, the way the morning sun hit the boardroom on the 38th floor. I had built it, not just with money, but with sleepless nights, with sacrificed weekends, with a single-minded determination that had left little room for anything else. And Tiffany, my ambitious, social-climbing daughter-in-law, had absolutely no clue. Her ignorance was, in a way, my own fault. After David was grown and my company was secure, I had made a conscious choice to step back. I promoted a brilliant, trusted COO to take the CEO title and the public-facing responsibilities that came with it. I took the quieter, far more powerful role of chairwoman of the board. I was tired of the galas, the interviews, the fawning attention. I just wanted to be Carol again. I bought my modest apartment, kept my old car, and found joy in simple things. Gardening, baking, and most of all, knitting. It became a sort of litmus test. People treated me as they saw me. A quiet, pleasant, middle-class widow. It showed me their true character. My son David knew I was financially secure, of course, but he had no concept of the scale. I had never burdened him with the details of corporate structures or holding companies. He thought his inheritance would be a comfortable sum, not a controlling interest in a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Tiffany worked at Aspire Marketing, a flashy firm we'd acquired in a portfolio diversification move 5 years prior. To her, Summit Innovations was a name on a memo, a distant mothership that approved her budgets. It never would have occurred to her to Google the founder's history. In her world, powerful women wore stilettos and commanded boardrooms with loud voices, not comfortable shoes and quiet dignity. I didn't fit her stereotype, so I was invisible. Worse than invisible. I was an obstacle. An embarrassment. The irony was so thick I could taste it. She, who worshipped at the altar of wealth and status, had called the police on the very source of the lifestyle she so desperately craved. The salary that paid for her designer dress, the corporate health insurance that covered Leo's checkups, the very financial stability that allowed her to live in that ridiculously oversized house. It all flowed from me. From the poor old woman she had just discarded like a piece of trash. I finally pulled into my designated spot in the unassuming parking garage beneath my apartment building. I cut the engine and the silence was absolute. I thought about the blanket. All those hours I had spent, my fingers working the needles, choosing the softest merino wool, picturing Leo wrapped up in its warmth. It wasn't just a gift. It was a piece of me. And she had thrown it in the garbage without a second thought. That was the moment the last of my sorrow evaporated, leaving behind something as hard and clear as diamond. This was no longer just about a disastrous birthday party. This was about a fundamental sickness of character. A person who could be that cruel, that dismissive to someone they perceived as powerless was a danger. A person who had raised my grandson to see the world through that same warped, classist lens was a threat to his very soul. I would not fire her. Firing was an ending. I wasn't interested in an ending. I was interested in an education. A long, difficult, and deeply uncomfortable education. She wanted to know her place? Oh, I was going to show her her place. And she was going to learn that it was a whole lot lower on the food chain than she ever could have imagined. I walked into my apartment, leaving the door unlocked. I knew my son would eventually call or come by. But I wouldn't answer. Not tonight. Tonight was for planning. Tonight, the quiet, unassuming chairwoman was back at her desk. The city was still asleep when I walked through the silent, marble lobby of the Summit Innovations Tower. Frank, the night security guard, gave me a surprised look. "Mrs. C. Burning the midnight oil or just starting early?" he asked with a warm smile. Frank had been with me for 30 years. He knew who I was, of course, but he was the soul of discretion. "Just starting early, Frank," I said. "Got a lot on my mind." "Well, the coffee's fresh in the 40th floor kitchenette," he said. "Help yourself." In the solitude of my office, with the city slowly waking up below me, I began my work. My first call was to Helen, my executive assistant at her home. I woke her up, but she didn't mind. When I told her what I needed, her voice turned sharp and efficient. "Consider it done, Carol. You'll have everything you need before the first department heads even arrive." While Helen worked her magic, I dove into the company's digital archives. I didn't just want Tiffany's HR file. I wanted to understand the ecosystem she had created around herself at Aspire Marketing. I started with her performance reviews. They were glowing, dynamic, innovative, a go-getter, unafraid to challenge the status quo. Her supervisor, a man named Mark, seemed utterly captivated by her. I made a mental note to review Mark's file next. An ecosystem like this doesn't thrive without an enabler. Then I accessed the HR complaint database, and the glowing image of Tiffany, the superstar, began to crumble into dust. There they were, the 3 flags like digital stains on her record. I opened the first one. It was from Susan Chun, a 62-year-old senior accountant. I knew Susan. She was meticulous, quiet, and had been with the company since the beginning. Her formal complaint detailed a budget meeting where Tiffany had not only dismissed her financial projections, but had done so with breathtaking cruelty. Perhaps if Susan spent less time with her abacus and more time on a computer made in this century, Tiffany had allegedly said to the entire room, we could get through this meeting before her retirement party. Susan wrote that the comment was met with nervous laughter, and that her supervisor, Mark, had simply moved on, leaving her utterly humiliated. Mark's official response to the complaint was a single sentence. Tiffany is a passionate leader who pushes for efficiency. I have counseled her on her delivery. Counseled, not disciplined. The second complaint was from Frank Miller, 58, a veteran IT specialist. Again, I knew him. Frank could troubleshoot a server mainframe with his eyes closed. His complaint was even more disturbing. He stated that Tiffany had repeatedly insisted he help with her personal devices, her son's iPad, her husband's laptop, on company time. When he had politely told her that was against policy, she had apparently retaliated by filing a report against him for slow response times and an inability to adapt to new software. In the report, she had written, "Perhaps it's time we invested in younger IT talent who can keep up with the pace of modern business." Mark had sided with Tiffany, putting Frank on a performance improvement plan. My hands felt cold as I opened the third file. Maria Garcia, custodial supervisor, age 62. The complaint wasn't from Maria, but against her. It was filed by Tiffany. The language was pure venom. She described Maria as incompetent, argumentative, and lacking a basic understanding of professional urgency. The crime? Maria's team had been in the middle of a scheduled deep clean of the bathrooms, and Maria had told Tiffany it would be 20 minutes before they could clean the conference room she had suddenly decided to use. For this, Tiffany had demanded she be disciplined. The result, signed off by Mark, was Maria's transfer to the less desirable, lower-paying night shift. Just then Helen walked in, her face grim. She placed a thick, heavy file on my desk, along with a stack of printed documents. "This is everything," she said quietly. "Personnel file, salary history, bonus records, and the email correspondence you requested." I flagged a few conversations you might find particularly illuminating. I spent the next 2 hours in a state of quiet mounting fury. The emails were a cesspool. It was all there in black and white. Tiffany mocking Susan's accent in an email to a colleague. Her joking with another manager about clearing out the deadwood in the older departments. Her entitlement was staggering. Her cruelty casual and relentless. Then I came to an email chain that made my breath catch in my throat. It was between Tiffany and her mother Barbara, sent from her work account, a violation of company policy in itself. Barbara was complaining about an upcoming family get-together. Tiffany's reply was a gut punch. "Ugh, I know. I have to deal with Carol this weekend. David is insisting." Just smile and nod. Try not to get stuck talking to her about her sad little knitting company. It's called Carol's Comforts LLC, or something equally tragic. God, it's just so embarrassing. You'd think for all her talk about hard work, she'd have more to show for it than a tiny apartment and a closet full of yarn. The sheer, unadulterated ignorance of it all was almost comical. She was typing those words on a company-issued laptop, in an office paid for by dividends from that sad little knitting company. Carol's Comforts LLC was not a hobby. It was the ironclad holding company I had structured with my lawyers decades ago. It was the legal fortress that owned Summit Innovations and all its subsidiaries. It was the source of all my power, hidden in plain sight, disguised by a name so homespun and unassuming that a person like Tiffany would never, ever think to look twice. I had seen enough of her character. Now I wanted to see her work. I navigated to her project files. Her portfolio was impressive, full of slick campaigns and positive results. I scrolled through them one after another, until my eyes landed on the file for the Heart of the City campaign. The one that had made her career. The one that had landed her that life-changing promotion and bonus. I opened the file. The presentation was slick, the graphics professional. But as I read the core concept, a cold dread washed over me. I'd seen this idea before. I knew this voice. And it wasn't Tiffany's. My heart began to pound in my chest. This wasn't just harassment. This wasn't just cruelty. If I was right, this was something far, far worse. There was a program I had started a few years back. A personal passion project called Innovation from Within. The premise was simple. Good ideas can come from anyone, anywhere. Twice a year, we opened submissions to every single employee in the Summit Innovations family, from the C-suite to the custodial staff. The winning ideas were funded, and the originators received a life-changing bonus and a seat at the table with the development team. It was my way of ensuring that the people on the ground floor, the ones who saw the company from a unique perspective, had a voice. I was immensely proud of it. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my heart thudding against my ribs. I navigated to the secure server where the archives for the program were stored. I set the date filter for 2 years prior and typed in the keywords: community, local, engagement. The search results loaded instantly. There were dozens of entries, but one title jumped out at me as if it were written in neon lights. Our City, Our Heart, a hyperlocal engagement strategy. The submitter's name was listed beside it: Maria Garcia. My hand was trembling as I clicked to open the attached PDF. It was a simple document. No fancy graphics or corporate jargon. It was just 20 pages of pure heartfelt brilliance. Maria had written about how the company felt disconnected from the neighborhoods it operated in. She proposed a campaign that would spotlight the small, family-owned businesses that were the true heartbeat of the city. The old Italian bakery, the third-generation tailor, the new Ethiopian coffee shop. She had laid out a plan to partner with them, to tell their stories, to weave them into our corporate narrative. It was raw, it was authentic, and it was the undeniable blueprint for Tiffany's Heart of the City campaign. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. Tiffany hadn't just been cruel to Maria. She had hollowed her out. She had seen this raw diamond of an idea, submitted with hope by a woman she considered invisible, and she had stolen it. She had polished it up with her corporate jargon, slapped her name on it, and presented it as her own stroke of genius. She had ridden Maria's creativity and integrity all the way to a promotion and a six-figure bonus, and then, as a final cruel twist of the knife, she had gotten the true author demoted to the night shift for the crime of being an inconvenience. It was a special kind of evil. The kind that smiles in your face while it slips a knife in your back. The kind that sees other people not as human beings, but as resources to be plundered. Now you have to understand something. In the 35 years I had run this company, I had dealt with every kind of problem. I'd fought off hostile takeovers, navigated economic downturns, and fired executives for incompetence. But this was different. This wasn't a business problem. This was a moral rot. And it had to be cut out. Immediately. I picked up the phone. "Helen," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Get Jennifer West, head of global HR, on the line. Tell her it's a code red. I want her in my office in 10 minutes. Jennifer was a sharp, competent woman who had been with me for a decade. When she walked in and saw the look on my face, she immediately sat down and took out a notepad. "What's happened, Carol?" I didn't speak. I simply turned my monitor around so she could see the two proposals, Maria's and Tiffany's, displayed side by side. I watched her read. I saw her professional composure crumble, replaced by a look of utter disgust. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking up at me. "The bonus on that campaign, it was $150,000. And Maria Garcia. She was the one Tiffany filed that ridiculous complaint against last month." "I know," I said. "Her supervisor, Mark, enabled all of it. He'll be gone by the end of the day. But I have a special plan for Tiffany. This calls for more than just termination. This calls for a lesson in humility. A hands-on immersive lesson." Jennifer looked at me, waiting. "I'm transferring her," I said. "Effective immediately. Her new role is junior sanitation technician." Jennifer blinked. "You're making her a janitor?" "Yes," I said. "But with a very specific assignment. She will be responsible for cleaning the lavatories. All of them. In the Aspire marketing building. The very floors where her former colleagues and subordinates work. She will wear the uniform. She will push the cart. And she will learn what it feels like to be invisible." Jennifer was silent for a moment, processing the sheer brutality of the move. "She will sue us for constructive dismissal. For everything under the sun." "Let her try," I said. "We will frame it as a temporary reassignment, part of a new mandatory ground-level leadership initiative. And we will make it clear that refusal to accept the transfer is grounds for immediate termination for cause. And the cause, Jennifer, will be documented as theft of intellectual property. That will follow her for the rest of her career. The choice will be hers. Scrub toilets or become unemployable." I paused, letting the weight of it settle. Then I added the final perfect detail. "Oh, and one more thing. Her new direct supervisor, the person she will take orders from every single day, the person who will sign off on her timesheets and approve her lunch breaks, will be Maria Garcia." Jennifer's eyes widened. A slow, grim smile spread across her face. "Carol," she said, "that is the most ruthless and frankly brilliant piece of corporate justice I have ever witnessed." "It's not justice yet," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "It's just the beginning of the lesson." The following Monday was the day. I couldn't just issue the order from on high. I needed to witness the fallout myself. I needed to see if there was a single shred of humanity left in her. A flicker of remorse that might be fanned into a flame. So I once again donned my disguise. The gray maintenance jumpsuit, the scuffed work boots, the baseball cap pulled down low. I became a ghost in the machine of my own company. I was in the maintenance corridor on the 35th floor of the Aspire marketing building, when Maria let Tiffany out of the elevator. The scene was everything I had imagined and more. Tiffany was dressed for a board meeting, not a bathroom. She was wearing a cream-colored silk blouse, sharply tailored black trousers, and heels that clicked with indignant fury on the polished concrete floor. Her face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. She clearly thought this was some sort of bizarre, temporary mistake that her lawyer would sort out by lunchtime. Maria, by contrast, was a portrait of quiet dignity. She was in her neat supervisor's uniform, her graying hair tied back in a practical bun. Her voice was calm and professional, betraying no hint of the history between them. "This will be your assigned floor for the week, Miss Maxwell," Maria said, gesturing down the long carpeted hallway. "The ladies' and men's lavatories are at the east and west ends. The supply closet is here." She unlocked a small windowless room. "Your uniform and equipment are inside. Please change and meet me back here in 10 minutes for your procedural briefing." Tiffany stared at Maria as if she were a talking dog. The idea of taking orders from this woman, this cleaner, was so far outside her realm of comprehension that she was momentarily speechless. "There has been a mistake," Tiffany finally said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I am a director. I'm sure if you just call HR." "I have my orders directly from HR, Ms. Maxwell," Maria cut in, her voice still perfectly even. "This is your new assignment. 10 minutes. Maria then turned and walked away, leaving Tiffany standing alone in the hallway, looking utterly bewildered. I watched from my vantage point as Tiffany stomped into the supply closet, slamming the door behind her. She emerged a few minutes later transformed. The ill-fitting, faded blue jumpsuit hung awkwardly on her frame. The hairnet mashed down her perfect blonde hair. She looked like a child forced to wear a costume she hated. The look of pure, impotent fury on her face was a masterpiece. For the next several hours I trailed them at a distance, pretending to check fire extinguishers and ceiling tiles. Maria was a patient, thorough teacher. She showed Tiffany how to properly mix the cleaning solutions, how to sanitize the surfaces, how to operate the industrial floor buffer. Tiffany's response was a masterclass in passive aggression. She performed every task with a sullen, resentful slowness. She accidentally splashed water on the floor. She forgot to restock the paper towels. At one point, I watched her deliberately try to boss Maria around. "Shouldn't we start with the executive restroom first?" Tiffany suggested, her voice laced with false sweetness. "It gets the most traffic." "We follow the established route, Ms. Maxwell," Maria replied without looking up from her checklist. "It's designed for maximum efficiency. The executive restroom is last. Please finish wiping down the mirrors in here." Tiffany's face tightened, but she said nothing. She was learning slowly that her title meant nothing down here. Around noon, Maria sent her on her lunch break. Tiffany didn't go to the bustling employee cafeteria. Instead, she found an empty stairwell, a concrete bunker where she thought she was alone. I slipped into the fire corridor on the floor below, the metal grating allowing her voice to travel down perfectly. She was on the phone, not with David this time but with her mother, Barbara. "You are not going to believe this, Mother," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "They actually have me doing it. Scrubbing toilets. Can you imagine? Me. It's that old crone from HR, Jennifer West. I know it's her. She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to humiliate me, to force me to quit." I heard Barbara's indignant squawk on the other end. "Of course David is trying to help," Tiffany continued. "But he's so soft. He thinks we should be strategic. Meanwhile, I'm down here with these people. They barely speak English, Mother. And my supervisor, you'd think she was a prison warden. She's this ancient Hispanic woman who probably doesn't even have a high school diploma." The casual, venomous racism of her words hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't just about classism or ageism. This was a deep, ugly rot in her soul. "I have to get out of here," she said, her voice cracking with genuine panic. "My hands are already ruined. My back hurts. This is not my life. This is what happens to people who fail. I am not a failure." I had heard enough. I had given her every opportunity to see the humanity in the people around her. I had placed her in a position where she could, for the first time in her life, experience the world from the bottom looking up. And she had learned nothing. Her worldview hadn't expanded. It had narrowed into a bitter, resentful pinpoint of self-pity. The experiment was over. The time for subtle lessons was past. It was time for the final, unavoidable confrontation. It was time for her to look her executioner in the eye. The following morning, I let Tiffany stew in her misery for exactly 1 hour. I imagined her, back in the blue jumpsuit, her spirit sinking even lower than it had been the day before. Then at 9:01 a.m., I had Helen send the summons. It wasn't an email this time. It was a formal, hand-delivered interoffice memo, delivered by one of the executive floor assistants. The optics were intentional. I wanted the delivery itself to be an event, a spectacle for the entire 35th floor. I watched on my security monitor as the young, sharply dressed assistant approached Tiffany while she was sullenly mopping a spill in the main corridor. He handed her the sealed envelope. Tiffany took it, a look of confusion on her face. She tore it open and read the single sentence inside. Ms. Maxwell, your presence is required in the chairwoman's office, 40th floor, at 10 a.m. sharp. There was no name, just the title. The chairwoman. A title so lofty, so removed from her daily reality, that she probably didn't even know who it was. I saw her say something to the assistant, likely asking who the chairwoman was. The assistant just gave a polite, non-committal shrug and walked away. The seed of fear had been planted. The next 45 minutes must have been torture for her. When it was finally time, Maria, following my explicit instructions, personally escorted her to the executive elevator. It was the private, high-speed elevator, the one that required a keycard access that Maria now possessed. The symbolism was not lost on me. I watched on the lobby camera as Tiffany stepped out onto the 40th floor. The difference was jarring. Downstairs was the world of cubicles and corporate hustle. Up here it was a world of quiet, understated power. Polished marble floors, original artwork on the walls, hushed voices behind solid mahogany doors. And she was walking through it all in a stained janitor's uniform, pushing her cleaning cart because Maria had instructed her to bring it with her. Her walk of shame was a masterpiece of corporate theater. Every head turned as she passed. The whispers followed her like the wake of a ship. She kept her eyes glued to the floor, her face burning with a humiliation so profound it was almost a physical presence in the room. She stopped in front of Helen's desk, a large, imposing piece of furniture that stood like a gatekeeper before the doors to my office. I was told to come here, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. The chairwoman? Helen, without so much as a flicker of emotion, stood up. Yes. She is expecting you. Please come this way. You can leave your cart here. Helen led her to the massive double doors of my office and opened one, holding it for her. Tiffany hesitated, took a deep breath as if preparing to face a firing squad, and stepped inside. The doors closed behind her with a soft, definitive click, sealing her in. I had arranged the scene perfectly. My chair was turned away from the door, facing the vast expanse of the city skyline. I wanted her to feel small. I wanted the sheer scale of the office, the silent testament to decades of success, to wash over her before she even saw my face. She stood awkwardly in the middle of the vast Persian rug, a tiny disheveled figure in a cavern of power. Hello, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You wanted to see me? I'm Tiffany Maxwell. As if I didn't know. I let the silence stretch for a full 10 seconds, letting her discomfort build. Then slowly, with a deliberate lack of haste that was a power move in itself, I swiveled my chair to face her. The series of emotions that flashed across her face was like watching a car crash in slow motion. First, there was a jolt of recognition, immediately followed by utter, baffled confusion. It was the look of a computer trying to process a command that made no logical sense. The cleaning lady from the party, here? In this office? Then, as the impossible truth began to dawn, the confusion curdled into pure, unadulterated shock. Her jaw dropped. It literally fell open. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, were filled with a dawning horror that was almost beautiful in its purity. Hello, Tiffany, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the tomb-like silence of the office, it sounded like a gunshot. She made a small, choking sound in the back of her throat. You, she finally whispered, the word barely a puff of air. How this isn't possible. Oh, it's very possible, I said, giving her a smile that was all teeth. I work here. In a manner of speaking. Please have a seat. You've had a very busy week. I imagine you must be tired. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. She didn't move. She seemed paralyzed, her brain short-circuiting as it tried to reconcile the two completely different images of me she held in her mind. The pathetic old woman in the simple dress, and the woman sitting behind a desk the size of a small car in the most powerful office in the city. Finally, her legs seemed to give out, and she stumbled into the chair, collapsing into it more than sitting. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the evidence of my life that she had never bothered to learn about. The photos of me with senators, the industry awards, the framed copy of the first stock certificate for Summit Innovations. She looked back at me, her face pale, her eyes filled with the terrified understanding of a mouse that has just realized it's been playing in the lion's den all along. The lesson was about to reach its climax. I let her squirm in the silence for a long, uncomfortable minute. I watched as her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of this new, terrifying reality. I could almost see the gears grinding behind her eyes as she replayed every insult, every condescending remark, every moment of cruelty, now recast in the horrifying light of the truth. Finally, she found her voice, though it was thin and reedy. This is a joke, right? A sick, twisted joke. You're what? His mother's friend? The CEO is letting you use his office to scare me. The sheer desperation behind the question was pathetic. I almost felt a flicker of pity for her. Almost. My name is Carol Shaw, I said, my voice cutting through her denial like a scalpel. I founded Summit Innovations in my garage in 1988. I served as its CEO for 25 years. I am now the chairwoman of the board and the majority shareholder. Aspire Marketing, the company that, until recently, employed you, is one of 17 subsidiaries wholly owned by this corporation. Your salary, your bonus, the funds for the marketing campaigns you were so proud of, they all came from me. I delivered each fact like a hammer blow, watching as her face crumbled under the weight of them. The last vestiges of her defiance vanished, replaced by a raw, primal fear. Now, I said, leaning forward and folding my hands on the pristine surface of my desk, let's talk about why you're here. Let's talk about theft. The word snapped her out of her stupor. I didn't steal anything, she insisted, her voice rising with a hysterical edge. That's a lie. It's slander. I didn't respond. I simply reached into the file folder on my desk, the same one I had shown to Jennifer, and pulled out two documents. I placed them side by side in front of her. Maria's simple, heartfelt proposal, and her own slick, plagiarized version. This is Maria Garcia's intellectual property, I said, tapping the first document. And this, I tapped the second, is a crime. You didn't just steal an idea, Tiffany. You stole a woman's voice. A woman you deemed so insignificant that you didn't think she mattered. You thought no one would ever notice. You were wrong. She stared at the papers, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. It was just a concept, she stammered, frantically trying to build a defense. An idea on paper. I was the one who made it work. I built the team, I managed the budget, I executed the strategy. That has value. Oh, I agree, I said smoothly. Execution has value. But in this company, integrity has more. And you have none. I leaned back, my eyes never leaving hers. And that's just the beginning of your problems. Let's move on to HR file number 74B. The formal harassment complaint from Susan Chan in accounting. You remember Susan, don't you? The woman with the abacus? Tiffany flinched. That was a joke. It was a high-pressure meeting. And file 78C, I continued, ignoring her. Frank Miller in IT. The old dog who couldn't keep up with your demands to fix your personal electronics on company time. He was inefficient, she snapped. I have high standards. And of course, I said, my voice dropping lower, there is the matter of your own official complaint against Maria Garcia, which directly led to her being punitively reassigned to the night shift. You destroyed a woman's work-life balance and cut her pay because she asked you to wait 20 minutes. Is that also what you call high standards? She was cornered. Every desperate justification she threw up, I batted down with cold, hard facts. Seeing that the professional angle was a lost cause, she abruptly switched tactics. Her face contorted and huge, gulping sobs began to rack her body. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Please, she wept, the tears streaming down her face. Please, Carol. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear, if I had known who you were, I never would have. The party was a nightmare. My mother was pressuring me. I wanted everything to be perfect for David. I just snap when I'm stressed. I'm not a bad person, I swear I'm not. I watched the performance without a flicker of emotion. It was like watching a nature documentary about a chameleon changing its colors to survive. Stop it, I said. The words were quiet, but they cut through her sobs like a razor. She looked up, startled, her fake tears momentarily forgotten. Stop it right now, I repeated. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending you're sorry. You are not sorry you called an elderly woman maintenance. You are not sorry you humiliated a loyal employee. You are not sorry you stole a woman's work. You are only sorry that the quiet old lady you stepped on turned out to be the one who owned the entire building. There's a difference. The truth of my words hit her, and the fake sorrow vanished, replaced by the ugly, snarling face of her true self. So that's what this is about, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. All of this, the uniform, the toilets, this whole sick little drama. It's because I didn't kiss your ring at a dinner party? This is your petty revenge. You're wrong, I said, standing up for the first time. I walked around the desk and stood before her, looking down at where she sat. This is not revenge. This is a corporate restructuring. You are a cancer in this company, a toxic asset that I am now liquidating. And you have two options. I laid them out for her just as I had for Jennifer. Resignation or termination for cause. Dignity or destruction. She stared up at me, her chest heaving. For a heart-stopping moment, I saw the self-destructive fury in her eyes and thought she would choose annihilation, just to spite me. But in the end, her narcissism was her undoing. The thought of permanent, public failure was more than she could bear. Give me the letter, she hissed through gritted teeth. I walked back to my desk and slid the prepared resignation letter and a heavy, expensive fountain pen across the desk. She snatched them up. Her signature was an angry, illegible scrawl. She threw the pen down, and it clattered loudly in the silence. She stood up, her eyes blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You think you've won, she said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. But you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. I'm going home right now and telling my husband everything. He's a good man. He won't stand for this. He will see what a manipulative, vindictive monster his mother truly is. He will choose me. He always chooses me. She turned and stalked out of my office, slamming the massive door behind her. The sound echoed like a declaration of war. I stood there for a long moment in the vibrating silence. Then I picked up my phone. She was right about one thing. David was a good man. And that was precisely why she had already lost. The phone call came 47 minutes later. I had used the time to have Helen order me a sandwich and a cup of black coffee. I knew I would need my strength. When David's name flashed on my screen, I took a calming breath and answered on the second ring. Mom, what in God's name is going on? His voice was a raw blend of confusion, panic, and second-hand rage. Tiffany is here, she's completely falling apart. She said you ambushed her, that you forced her to resign. She said you threatened to ruin her. Is this true? Is any of this true? The barrage of questions was expected. Tiffany was an expert at crafting a narrative where she was the blameless victim. I let him vent, listening to the frantic, desperate story his wife had clearly fed him. David, I said when he finally paused for breath, my voice deliberately gentle but firm. I understand you're upset. A lot has happened today. I am not going to try to explain 35 years of my life and a complex corporate situation over the phone, while your wife is screaming in the background. She's not screaming, Mom, she's crying. She's terrified. She thinks you're trying to destroy our marriage. Is that what she thinks? I asked softly. David, I want you to do something for me. I want you to come to my apartment. Tonight. At 8 o'clock. Bring Tiffany with you. Let her tell you her story right here in my living room. And then I will show you mine. I promise you after tonight you will have all the answers you need. You will know the absolute truth. I don't know, Mom. He hesitated. She's in no state. 8 o'clock, David, I interrupted, a hard edge creeping into my voice. This is not a negotiation. The future of our family depends on this conversation. Be here. I hung up before he could argue further. I spent the next few hours preparing not my home but my evidence. I printed everything. I arranged the documents in a simple chronological folder. I didn't want a dramatic gotcha moment. I wanted the cold, hard weight of the truth to do its own work. At precisely 8:15 they arrived. Tiffany had changed into a soft cashmere sweater, her makeup reapplied to look tastefully tear-streaked. She clung to David's arm, the very picture of a damsel in distress. David looked exhausted, his face a mask of conflict, a man torn between the woman he loved and the mother who had raised him. I led them into my living room. They sat on my comfortable but unremarkable sofa, looking wildly out of place. "All right, Mom," David said, his voice heavy. "We're here. Tiffany, tell her what you told me." And so began the performance. Tiffany, with tears glistening in her eyes, spun a masterful tale of woe. She spoke of a mother-in-law who had always been cold and distant. She painted the birthday party as a simple misunderstanding, blown out of all proportion by my oversensitivity. She described the janitorial assignment as a sadistic game, a way for me to humiliate her. She claimed the evidence of plagiarism was a professional disagreement, that I had twisted the facts to fit my narrative of revenge. She was convincing. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have even believed her. Throughout her speech, she would look at David, her eyes pleading. "You know I would never do those things, honey. You know my heart." When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the small room. David looked at me, his eyes full of pain and confusion. "Mom, what do you have to say to that?" I didn't say a word. I simply stood, retrieved the folder from my desk, and placed it on the coffee table in front of him. It wasn't a thick folder, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. "I have nothing to say, David," I told him. "But this folder does. I want you to read it. I want you to read every single page. Then we can talk." Tiffany's composure cracked. "David, no. It's all lies she's twisted. Don't look at it." But it was too late. David, a man desperate for solid ground in a sea of chaos, opened the folder. The first document on top was the HR complaint from Susan Chan. I watched David's eyes scan the page. I saw his brow furrow in confusion. "Who is Susan Chan?" "An accountant Tiffany called an antique in front of 20 people," I said quietly. He flipped the page. Frank Miller's complaint. His frown deepened. "This says she tried to get an IT guy fired for not fixing her personal laptop. She called him an old dog," I supplied. He kept turning pages, his movements becoming faster, more frantic. He saw the emails, her own words mocking her colleagues. He saw her complaint against Maria. I watched as the narrative Tiffany had so carefully constructed began to unravel in his mind. Then he reached the centerpiece. The two proposals side by side. The evidence of the theft was so blatant, so undeniable, it needed no explanation. He stared at the documents for a full minute, his face turning ashen. He picked up Maria's sworn affidavit, which detailed the timeline of her submission and her subsequent demotion. He slowly lifted his head. He didn't look at me. He looked at his wife. The look in his eyes was something I had never seen before. It was the look of a man seeing a complete stranger for the very first time. "You stole it," he whispered. The words were not an accusation. They were a statement of fact, a discovery of a terrible, undeniable truth. "You stole that poor woman's idea." "David, baby, listen to me," Tiffany began, her voice high and panicked. "It's complicated corporate stuff. You wouldn't understand." "I understand perfectly," he roared, surging to his feet. The sudden explosion of sound made both of us jump. All the years of suppressed frustration, of being managed and manipulated by her, erupted in that single moment. "I understand that you have been lying to me. Every single night you came home from your terrible new job, you were playing the victim. But you weren't the victim, were you, Tiffany? You were the monster." He paced the small room, running his hands through his hair. "And the party, my God, the party. Calling the police on my mother. My own mother. I defended you. I told myself you were stressed, that you didn't mean it. But you did mean it. You meant every single cruel word because you thought she was nobody. You thought she was worthless." That was when Tiffany made her final fatal mistake. Her desperation turned to pure, undiluted rage. "She is worthless," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. Look at her. Look at this pathetic little apartment. She's an embarrassment, and I was the only one with the guts to say it. I was trying to protect our life, our reputation from her. The ugly words hung in the air. David stopped pacing. He turned to face her, and his face was terrifyingly calm. All the rage had vanished, replaced by something cold and dead. Get out, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What? She gasped. Get out, he repeated, each word a chip of ice. Get out of my mother's apartment. Go to the house, pack a suitcase. One suitcase. I will have the rest of your things sent to your mother's. We're done, Tiffany. It's over. My lawyer will be in touch with yours about the divorce, and about custody arrangements for Leo. The words divorce and custody finally broke through her narcissistic haze. She stared at him wide-eyed, then turned to me. This is your fault, she screamed. You did this. You ruined my life. No, Tiffany, I said, my voice filled with a weariness that went bone deep. You did this to yourself. You just refused to see it. As David held the door open for her, she stalked out without another word. The slam of the door echoed the final violent end of their marriage. David leaned against the closed door, his shoulders slumping, and slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. The battle was won. But looking at my broken son, it didn't feel like a victory at all. The months that followed were a quiet, painful process of rebuilding. It was like cleaning up after a hurricane. The storm itself was violent and swift, but the work of clearing the debris and laying a new foundation took time, patience, and a strength I didn't always know I had. The divorce was as acrimonious as I expected. Tiffany, true to form, tried to fight for everything. She hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer and attempted to paint herself as the wronged party, a devoted wife and mother cast aside by a vindictive mother-in-law and a spineless husband. But the truth, as it often does, had a weight of its own. The evidence of her corporate malfeasance, which David's lawyer skillfully introduced during discovery, dismantled her credibility piece by piece. In the end, facing the prospect of a public trial that would ruin what was left of her reputation, she agreed to a modest settlement and a custody arrangement that gave David primary physical custody of Leo. She took her money and moved back to California to live with her mother, vanishing from our lives as quickly as she had entered them. My first priority was my son. I watched him navigate the painful aftermath, the grief not for the woman Tiffany was, but for the woman he had thought she was. There was anger, there was shame for his own blindness, and there was a deep, gnawing guilt over how he had allowed me to be treated. We spent long evenings talking, not just about Tiffany but about everything. About his childhood, about his father's early death, about the pressures he had felt to build a perfect life. It was a painful, necessary excavation of years of unspoken feelings. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to heal. He left the high-pressure world of corporate marketing, taking a significant pay cut to work for a local environmental nonprofit. The relief in him was palpable. It was like watching a man who had been holding his breath for 10 years finally exhale. My other priority was my company. The Tiffany situation had been a wake-up call. It had exposed a weakness, a cultural vulnerability that I was determined to fix. I worked closely with Jennifer in HR to implement sweeping changes. We overhauled the complaint system, creating a direct, anonymous channel to my office for any employee who felt they were a victim of harassment or bullying. We instituted mandatory, intensive leadership and ethics training for all management-level employees. And I made a point of being more visible, of walking the floors and talking to the people who were the lifeblood of my company. My proudest achievement was promoting Maria Garcia. I didn't just make her a supervisor again. I created a new position for her, Director of Employee Welfare and Workplace Culture. Her job was to be the voice of the hourly workers, to ensure their concerns were heard at the highest levels. The day I offered her the job, she cried. "Mrs. Shaw," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I just wanted to be treated with respect. I never imagined this." "Respect is the bare minimum, Maria," I told her. "You've earned a seat at the table." I also made sure she received the full bonus from the Heart of the City campaign, with interest, as well as a significant back payment for the wages she had lost on the night shift. It was more than just money. It was a restoration of her dignity. 6 months after that terrible night, life had found a new, quieter rhythm. One bright Saturday afternoon in October, I was sitting on a blanket in Washington Park, the golden autumn sun warming my face. David was a few feet away, throwing a frisbee with a delighted, squealing Leo. He looked happy, genuinely happy. The haunted, tired look was gone from his eyes. Leo, his cheeks flushed with excitement, ran over and threw himself into my lap. "Grandma, watch this," he said, showing me a wobbly cartwheel he had been practicing. "That's amazing, sweetheart," I said, hugging him tight. "You're getting so strong." David came and sat beside me, handing me a bottle of water. "He's been practicing all week," he said, smiling. "He said he wanted to show you. He told me, 'Grandma is the strongest person I know.'" Tears pricked my eyes. I thought back to that awful birthday party, to the moment Tiffany had ripped him from my arms. We had come so far. "He's a good boy, David," I said, my voice a little thick. "You're a good father." He looked out across the park, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said quietly, "for years I thought power was what Tiffany had. The confidence, the ambition, the way she could command a room. I was so dazzled by it I didn't see that it was all hollow. It wasn't strength. It was just a hunger to control people." He looked at me, his eyes clear and full of a new understanding. "Real power, it's what you have, Mom. It's quiet. It's the power to build things, to protect people, to stand for something. I get that now." I reached out and squeezed his hand. My son had finally truly come home. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grass, I watched Leo chase a butterfly, his small form silhouetted against the brilliant orange sky. I thought about the word inheritance. For so long I had thought of it in terms of stocks and assets, a portfolio to be passed down. But I realized now that the real inheritance wasn't the company. It was the values that had built it. Integrity, resilience, compassion, the unwavering belief that every single person has worth, and that it is our sacred duty to treat them with dignity. That was the legacy I wanted to leave for my grandson. Not a kingdom of glass and steel, but a compass for his soul. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey. It was a difficult chapter of my life, but one that taught me so much. I want to ask you, the amazing community watching this, have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own values, even when it meant confronting someone you loved? It's a lonely road, and I would love to hear your stories of strength in the comments below. Sharing helps us all feel a little less alone. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories from the heart. Thank you for listening.